We don't need to have something like that between two agencies, SEC and CFTC. Field is strewn with the carcasses of would-be products that never made it anywhere, even where the SEC and CFTC were trying to play nicely together in the sandbox back in the 80s and the 90s. So all I'm pleading for is flexibility so that we can keep the regulatory scheme adaptable to changes in the marketplace and technology as we go forward.
It's a new day at the SEC, and you've been saying that, and I just want everybody to be able to hear from you about what that means to you.
Well, it is a new day, and especially for this industry, I've been in and around it for a while, obviously, and so I feel your pain, and just even hear some of the stories that I've heard about debanking and other sorts of things. The lawfare that was being waged over the last few years is, even more than I imagined. And so I think, obviously we've changed as far as our approach goes. We're no longer a head in the sand, which has prevailed for a while, hoping maybe that crypto would go away. And then after that came the regulation through enforcement, and so we saw how that went. So now it's different. Now we're about innovation. We want to embrace innovation. And historically, the SEC, frankly, has not shunned innovation. It might not have been at the vanguard of, kind of being the cheerleader for it, but it didn't stop it. And so going all the way back to like the 1960s, there was a big bull market there in the United States equities markets. And so there was so much trading, and they were dealing with paper certificates, which are pretty cool when you look at them, works of art. They're nice for the wall. But, the trouble was that, you had to process them, and there was not the data processing ability and capability at the time. So the New York Stock Exchange and other exchanges had to close down at least one day a week in order just to process all of the paper, and sometimes 2 days a week. And so that's incomprehensible for us now as we talk about 24/7 potentially securities markets around the world. So anyway, so the SEC was there and worked with the industry, and that's how DTCC came about, where securities were then digitized, and so they were globalized, the globalized securities, and immobilized that way, and then traded digitally. So that was a huge innovation. And other things through the years, the automatic trading systems, ETFs, all of those things SEC enabled through a creative use of rulemaking, of course prompted by people approaching the SEC and saying, what if, can we do it? And I remember my old boss, Richard Breeden, in the early 90s, the staff had been trying to think about ETFs, and when he said, well, because he had dumped the whole big file on my desk, saying, figure out why this has taken years to not even get out of the agency. And so the staff was saying, well, we're not sure if the market wants it. And so Richard had the best retort, well, how do you think you're going to find out? And that is like, let's try it and see what happens. So things like that is what we're doing now with Project Crypto, and working with our counterparts at other financial regulatory agencies through the President's Working Group. So we're still meeting every week. We came out with a report a few weeks ago, which I encourage you all to read. It's relatively thick, but anyway, but it's, I think there are a lot of great ideas, and we're setting out at the SEC to implement them as soon as we can.
Yeah, it is a new day, right? And you guys have already made so much progress, Commissioner Peirce with the task force, and one thing I think people don't understand is how OG you are, and that back he really is. And so like in 2015, I started in this in 2015, and I think you were in even before me. So he is very OG in the crypto space. And the traditional finance space too, which is so important to have both the TradFi, expertise and knowing the history And, you know, from you were a kid, you know, going through computers and stuff, like first mover, you know, always trying the first electronic products and everything this whole time. So I think it's, you can really see that in your leadership. And I don't know if everybody knows these things about, you know, how, how tech forward you've been throughout your entire life and career.
Well, I still have an analog watch, but anyway, but that's okay. But no, there are, you know, there's a lot to be done. There's a lot of spring cleaning to do at the SEC, not just with forging new roads, you know, with this industry, but on the traditional side, there's a lot of, like I said, spring cleaning to do. When we look at, say, the IPO markets, I've said before, I want to make IPOs great again. You know, there's so much negativity around going to the public markets right now because of a lot of things, just the cost of it, the complexity of the regulatory scheme and disclosure, the litigation issues around corporate governance and the weaponization of some of that. So we need to clean up a lot of that and make it much more efficient. And so we'll be setting out to do that and bring people on to help us achieve that.
Yeah, and with the launch of Project Crypto, I think that's a really great initiative in moving forward and doing all of these things. And I think, you know, I was very thrilled to be in the room when you announced it in that speech. And I think there was a standing ovation around the world about, you know, bringing our markets on chain. And can you help everybody kind of understand a little bit more about Project Crypto? Because there's so many really important parts of it that you've discussed about, you know, bringing it on chain and making the U.S. the crypto capital and, you know, reshoring crypto offerings and how important just competition is, how important, you know, choice for market participants and even regulatory competition. So
yeah, there's a huge amount to do. And so the good thing is we have a president who has thrown down the gauntlet. I mean, he's not shrinking from this, and he understands the importance of it. He said it many times himself, you know, even before he got into office here most recently. So, you know, he wants to make America, you know, the world running on American technology and make America, you know, the crypto capital of the world. So that's a pretty, you know, that's a pretty good goal, I think, and a challenging one. So we at the SEC, in our little patch, you know, it's an important patch of it, you know, need to be forward-thinking. And again, with this President's Working Group and David Sachs and Bo Hines, who are leading that, I think that's been, and Treasury that has taken the pen to it. I think that's great. Has written down a whole, you know, we've forged a whole bunch of to-dos from that. And so we'll be, you know, attacking that, you know, and already are. So as we go on, you know, there are a lot of questions to be answered. And so I'm, you know, salute the work of the folks in Congress who have, you know, passed the Genius Act, which was great. Hallelujah. I mean, that really is a seminal step for the United States Congress and the government to now officially recognize at least one part of digital assets. And so then there's a second bill that's come out of the House of Representatives called the Clarity Act, and you heard from Chairman Scott here earlier. He's a great guy. He has a really great committee that he's working with, the banking committee, and so I look for good things to come out of that. There's some things that you know we need to do in this whole thing, but part of it is to bring clarity to this industry. You've needed it so badly. You've paid enough in legal fees and whatnot, not just to fend off the government, but to try to figure out, you know, what the crazy quilt of different opinions, court opinions and statutes in the different jurisdictions. How do you kind of push forward in a legal business? And so that's one thing that we want to try to do. But what I really hope for is, you know, I didn't come to Washington to engage in the turf battle. That's the last thing in the world I want to do. But we have to future-proof what is going on and what we're going to be doing the rules of the road, because 5-10 years from now, things will be completely different, I'm sure, and we can't like put things into like little, cement surrounded pockets that are immutable. So we have to have flexibility, I think, and so as far as the different areas, so securities, commodities, the banking area and whatnot, stable coins, with the Genius Act, I think that took a really good stride there. And so for the rest of it, I've been talking about having a super app type of approach where why does one have to have a type of permission slip to go from being a broker-dealer to dealing in commodities or whatnot. I think if we have, like if you look at the banking industry, where you would never really design the regulatory scheme the way it is now, how it's grown up for 150 years, but it works. It's very flexible. You have the banking system, and you have different pockets of it, the Fed, the controller of the currency, the FDIC, and all of that, and the states. So, but if one regulator becomes too obstinate or something like that, you can take your charter and go somewhere else who might be allowing you to do what you might want to do. Like, for example, famously, life insurance with banks. The control of the currency back, maybe 50, 40 years ago, allowed banks, national banks, to go into that, and then others followed suit. And I'm not talking about going down to the least common denominator. I'm talking about having a system where there is, like, we keep people honest by having kind of friendly competition, friendly, balance of power, and without having, like, I like to compare to, in the 1500s, the Pope divided the world between Spain and Portugal, the two big empires trying to struggle over territory. And so we don't need to have something like that. Between two agencies, SEC and CFTC, the field is strewn with the carcasses of would-be products that never made it anywhere. Even where the SEC and CFTC were trying to play nicely together in the sandbox back in the 80s, in the 90s, I'm thinking of single stock futures, portfolio margining. It wasn't that the two commissions didn't get along, at the board level, but it was even at the staff level where there was sniping and just prevarication there that didn't allow things to move forward. So anyway, all I'm pleading for is, flexibility so that we can keep the regulatory scheme adaptable to changes in the marketplace and technology as we go forward.
And I think that's a really important distinction too, and like the Shad-Johnson Accord of making them work together to come up with something. And I think it's novel the way that you're thinking about it more as of an alternative, right? So they have the alternative types of frameworks. So there's one under different regulators, and there can be federal and state, and so there's optionality depending on your business, depending on how the regulators choose to do their regulations. So like some of the things I think people don't recognize is like all of the authority, exemptive authority, and how flexible the SEC is as an agency compared to the other agencies. You can trade on smaller systems. You have the Reg ATS, alternative trading systems, and you can exempt out and do so many flexible things with the SEC using the exemptive authority as long as it's not hamstrung, by any kind of legislation. So I think that's really novel and something that people, maybe aren't appreciating the ability to have alternative systems. In a super app, I love like the horizontal super app where you can, trade your commodity securities and other things on one platform,
right.
There's
no reason why not. And so we have, right now people don't realize it, but securities exchanges could, if they wanted to, trade gold or, wheat for that matter, not the future side. That has to go to under this Commodity Exchange Act to futures exchange, and there they have their regulatory scheme. But there's inherent flexibility right now, and as you say, we have flexibility at the SEC. under the current statutory framework, and we are taking that now. And so I think it'll be really important to have Congress undergird what we do with a statute. So again, to future-proof it from hanky-panky in the future, from somebody coming again. But anyway, but we have the flexibility to move forward, and we are moving forward. And so hopefully, whenever Congress does what they do, they'll be able to follow on with the path that we have set forth.
Yeah, and with that too, the work that you're doing with the administration and Congress, I think is also important, and people want to know about. Is it was in the president's the working group paper that about continuing forward with what you're doing, and you've been working on a lot of kind of things that are really integral to market structure.
Yes.
And so to see kind of your approach, how the SEC is approaching market structure, which may be different than what we're seeing in the current drafts of the legislation. And one thing I wanted to focus on particularly, because there's a lot of chatter about it in the community, is this focus on decentralization in the legislation, and just kind of get some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So decentralization, I think, is sort of a red herring, frankly. And it's nowhere in the statute, and it's not in Howie, it's not in, so anyway, it's kind of cropped up, and the SEC at the staff level made kind of a statement about that so a number of years ago. We're not, I don't personally actually, feel bound to that at all. We're going to be going in a different direction, and again, this is with the flexibility. I think we should have learned over the last decade or so that we cannot have things so abstruse that lawyers can't give opinions to their clients, and that the clients then have to spend lots of time for legal analysis that may not go anywhere. So that's our goal, is to have good rules of the road that we put down, and hopefully, again, like I said, undergirded by statutory explicit statute. But in the meantime, through our own work with exemptive authority and other things, we will be able to provide that certainty. So, as far as the decentralization issue goes, again, I think that's the wrong analysis, with respect to the securities laws.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting that such a focus on that. I'm not really sure, where it came from in, continuing to grow any kind of support, because even, people, I think, that came from a former director of corporation finance statement that, many securities lawyers and others have just kind of disavowed and not thought that was the right kind of way forward, overly focusing on one factor of a multi-factor test of one type of a security to then somehow take over the entire analysis of securities laws is
Yeah, I think it's not really a productive way of spending time. I'd like to point out that Bernie Moreno, who's a senator from Ohio, a freshman senator, back in 2015, he was a car salesman, and so he saw that there needed to be car titles could be put on chain and make it much more efficient to process them and everything. So he did, and he had a company that was doing that. But so that wasn't a security. It's on chain and all that, very centralized. That's not a security. And so I think the analysis has to be different. If you look at Howie itself, the orange itself was not a security. The orange tree was not a security, but the gestalt around it of, the organization and the promises made and all that, according to the Supreme Court, that was a security, but the individual components are not. And so we cannot go about looking at oranges, the tokens themselves, as necessarily being a security. I know there's a difference in circuits, and we've seen with respect to some of at the district court level, on the federal side, some of this analysis, maybe different ways, but you know, from the SEC's perspective, you know, we will plow forward and on this idea that, you know, just the token itself is not necessarily the security, and probably not. There are very few, in my mind, tokens that are securities, but it depends on what's the package around it and, you know, how that's being sold. But I can buy an orange, and I'm not necessarily buying the promise to have somebody, you know, harvest it, squeeze it, you know, and then market it, and then send me the dividends. So that's a lot different than I think just buying a token, you know, in the marketplace. So anyway, that's how we're going to be proceeding, and obviously there will be nuances and whatnot, but our goal is to set, you know, really firm and helpful guidelines that can be changed later. So let's not have it etched in stone through statute and whatnot, but we can be flexible, you know, as the technology develops. So I think it's a really exciting a time to be involved in all of this, and look forward to comments and from you all and your colleagues. So.
You know, and Congress and the administration are lucky to have an SME like you to go to. We're very fortunate, and so glad that you're leading this, and you're making it so that not only we have some clarity and you know, forward-thinking innovation, but also being, I think how you said it is perfect, is then when you are a security, it's not a scarlet letter.
It's not,
so,
right. So we're going to be making IPOs great again, but also being a security great again, and it's not, you know, not a death sentence. So anyway.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.